Welcome to another episode of the Helpside Basketball Show. Today we have a special guest all the way from North Carolina. So she is, my goodness, we are so blessed to have you in the building. Her name is Courtney Banghart, head coach of North Carolina women's basketball team. Thank you for coming in.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here. I've known you a while, and this is going to be fun.
Awesome. So we're going to get right into it. You're originally from New Hampshire, where you grew up playing many sports. You were a highly recruited soccer player, and then you chose Dartmouth College for your D1 experience. How did you go from soccer superstar to walking on to a women's basketball team?
Yeah, it's a kind of a unique story. And so, remember this was 20, maybe even 25 years ago. And
Yeah.
so sports perhaps weren't quite the vocation and also just the value they are now. And so my parents really felt like college was an opportunity to get the very best education you could. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I was a high school All-American in soccer, but I was the kid that, I had the scoring record in the state, but I was the kid that as soon as my soccer game was over, I'd still be wearing my shin guards and my cleats and I'd go out and shoot in the driveway, the basketball. I've just always loved basketball more. And so I was going on my recruiting trips. I went on a recruiting trip to Boston College and to Notre Dame and to Dartmouth to play soccer. And the soccer coach at the time got the job. He was at Dartmouth and he took the job at Stanford. And he
Mhm.
called me and he said, "I'm actually going to take the Stanford job. So you can come with me or you can stay on at Dartmouth." And I called the basketball coach and I said, "Man, I'd really love the opportunity to play basketball here." And luckily, being from New Hampshire, she had known about me as a basketball player there, even though I didn't do any of the club stuff and all that.
Mhm.
And so I'll be honest, the rest is history. I put a basketball in my hand and I never looked back.
Wow, that's crazy story.
Yeah.
And I read that basketball was yeah, obviously your favorite sport because
Yeah.
you would do that after you played soccer. So
Hmm.
you clearly had a love for the game, but it
Hmm.
wasn't actually your best sport.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I read a little bit, you did tennis as well. So,
Yes.
I mean, you were just super sporty.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm from a small state, so you kind of need people at every sport to fill your rosters. But yeah, I was a state champion in tennis, singles and doubles, as well, and actually won 12 high school state championships throughout my journey.
Wow.
And so, I was going to use tennis to try to get into school if I needed to try to get into the best school I could. Um, and so I played pickleball this morning. I mean, I still am very active in sports. But basketball has just been the sport, honestly, that I've always watched. I've watched with a critical eye. I've always enjoyed playing. I love, like, there was an outdoor league when I was growing up that would play in the summer, and I was never going to miss that outdoor game,
Wow.
of just kind of straight pickup. So, it probably was the sport that I'm small, and it was just probably the sport that I played the least organized,
Mhm.
but loved the most. And
Mm.
I hope that's a message to folks that specialization early maybe isn't the right choice, but also,
Mhm.
if you just, your passion will evolve, and your passion will shine brightest if you just listen to it. And it was always the sport that I enjoyed the most, and I ended up being the best at it. I think I've gone the furthest with it. But yeah,
Thank goodness. Thank goodness,
yeah.
because we value your presence in the basketball space.
Oh,
So you ended up having a solid college career, and
mhm.
you held the Ivy League record for three-pointers made. You won two league titles along the way, and then you made the transition to coaching.
Yeah.
Talk about that transition, and did you
Mhm.
always know that you wanted to coach,
Mhm.
or did you see something that was missing as far as how players are being coached?
Mm. It's a great question. Well, first, I majored in neuroscience, so here I have an Ivy League degree in neuroscience, and partly because I thought the women in the sciences would be highly employable, right? And again, you just never knew that coaching was actually going to be, it was going to be a vocation. And so, no, I didn't always know that. I went down after college. They offered me to be a basketball coach at a boarding school in Washington, D.C. And I
Mhm.
said, I'm not moving to Washington, D.C. to coach basketball, at a high school with an Ivy League degree. So they let me teach 2 classes and they let me be the girls' athletic director. So I did
Mhm.
that for about 3 years and got an opportunity to get my master's back at Dartmouth. And they would pay for it if I was also an assistant basketball coach.
Ah.
So I went back to Dartmouth and got my master's while I was coaching. And in the same week, I defended my thesis, my graduate thesis. I turned 29 and I got the offer to be the head coach at Princeton in the Ivy League, a lot of my peer group had suggested that, taking a job before you're ready is kind of career suicide. And I've just always been one that has been not driven by fear, but driven by the fear of regret. And
Mhm,
I thought, if if I'm gonna go be an assistant basketball coach to maybe someday get a head coaching job when I'm quote more ready, you
mhm.
know, who knows that that's going to be the right one either, right? And so I said I might as well learn on the job, and so
Right.
took the job at Princeton, and literally have never looked back. I was there for 12 years, and then got the Carolina job. So
Yeah,
it's
and
been a
so
unique story.
yeah, no, and so you took Princeton from like and turned that program all the way around.
Hmm.
And you you ended up winning 5 consecutive Ivy League titles, and you went 30 and 0 in 2015, and you took home the Naismith Coach of the Year award.
Hmm.
And looking back, what made you choose Princeton?
Hmm.
And was there something unique about Princeton,
Hmm.
outside of being a prestigious school, that made success possible there?
I think honestly, Merrick, what happened is that they were good at everything but women's basketball. They had
Mm,
never been to an NCAA tournament in women's basketball when I took the job. Right, and I
mhm,
think we went of 7 of the last 8 that I was there, but, I knew that it was a place that had success in other athletic programs, and so it wasn't institutional, right? It was perhaps they hadn't found the right fit, right? I knew I could go in a living room and say, "I chose, the Ivy League over full scholarships as well," even though it was a different sport, I didn't need to necessarily lead with that part, right? I I just felt like I could sell the experience of being a student athlete in the Ivy League, and then again, it was winning. It had won more Ivy titles than any other school. They hadn't
mhm,
been in basketball, so I just felt like I could be the one that could, figure out the basketball part. And I felt really lucky. Gary Walters, the AD at the time, I think he gave me a chance because he was a basketball coach himself before
mhm.
being an AD, and I think he valued my playing experience uniquely. The fact that I actually played basketball in the Ivy League, he had watched me play and compete, and felt like that was something that would transfer in the coaching process. So, also, I coached when I coached at Episcopal. It was a boarding school,
Right.
right? And so nobody was really paying attention. And I'll be honest, when you take the job at Princeton that had never been to a tournament, no one's really paying attention. So where
Right.
everybody saw risk, I saw opportunity. And It was my first love, being able to build a program, one that is sustained success. It's continued since I've been gone, which means I did something really meaningful. And so yeah, it ended up being the really right decision. But I hope it's a
Mhm.
message to fear regret more than failure.
Yeah, so you were, I mean, basically fearless, and was like, I don't know, that's a pretty big leap of faith, just not having, any head coaching,
Mhm.
experience prior to that, and just jumping in head first. Like, is that
Mhm.
something that is
Yeah.
typical of Courtney Banghart, or is this
Yeah.
like, you know what, I
You
got,
know,
I'm just going for it.
it's right. I think it's honestly, I felt like I had only been really a grad assistant, right? I felt like it was, if not now, if I'm not going to be good at coaching, I'd rather know young, and then I still have time to build up some credible equity in something else.
Mhm,
And it's kind of how I coach now. Like, failure is not an option. It's just not. You've got to figure out a way, maybe. Um, and I remember when I was taking the Carolina job, again, the naysayers are saying, "Hey, you'd be in the Hall of Fame if you stay at Princeton, and you're winning 80% of your games, and at the high major level, everyone gets fired." And I guess I just never read those books that your journey has to look like everybody else's, right? Um, and so again, I felt like if I didn't take the Carolina job, I would have regret that I never really did it at the highest level.
mhm,
So it's not that I'm an absence of fear, Merrick. It's that I'm actually deathly afraid of the fear of regret. Like, I
mhm,
really don't want to, when things are said and done, have regretted that I didn't go for it, whatever that looks like. And if failure happens along the way, it's just not an option, right? You'll
right.
always find a way. Yeah, so I think that's
W
kind of has driven my decision making,
Uh-huh,
in kind of every stop, even going to the Ivy League. I was a good student, but I probably wasn't as prepared as. I'll never forget it. I walked into my freshman dorm, and I was picking my classes, and my random roommate at the time, she came in with 10 credits. I was like,
mm,
"What? I don't even know how does that work?" And I had 0 credits. I was like, "I'm already behind. I hadn't even started." It's just, yeah, I think the opportunity to get an Ivy League education, I didn't want to regret not doing that.
Mhm. And so in 2019, you became the head coach of North Carolina,
Mhm.
and coaching you're, like, coaching at such a high profile school with a storied history, Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
Carolina Blue, like, everything about the university
Yeah.
is so storied. What was the biggest adjustment going from Ivy League to the ACC?
Probably as you alluded to, the magnitude of it, right? Eyes are on you everywhere all the time, right? And so the obscurity of being in the Ivy League, those days were over. I was still recruiting. I mean, I had 4 kids that I coached in the non-scholarship. Princeton got drafted in the WNBA. So my recruiting wasn't that different. It was really just the magnitude of everything. The eyes, the size of your staff, the more things that are involved, in running a program at this kind of international really prestige.
Mhm.
And so that was really different. And anytime you get a job, there's usually a reason the job is open.
Right.
Right? And so I had left something that was really kinda cooking, and it was cooking without a ton of my it was sort of moving on its own in a really positive way because we had built it so
Mhm.
strongly to a
Mhm.
program that really needed that now. And it
Right.
takes a totally different energy to sustain success, which is really hard to do, than to build success. And so I kind of shifted the energy to more in the build stage, which was also um, you have some doubts, right? You have some fatigue, and the decisions you make are really critical,
Mhm.
and all of that. I don't wish the rebuilds on anybody. I think some people are really built for it. I'm really not. I'm really built into sustained success. But I found a way, and it got done. So I'm glad now that that's past me.
Yeah, and I mean, you had a couple normal seasons at North Carolina when you first got there, and
Mhm,
then you ended up getting, a really nice recruiting class with
mhm,
4 pretty much All-American.
mhm,
They all got invited to the Jordan Brand Classic.
mhm,
Talk about your recruiting kind of part
mhm.
at the college level. Like, I've personally seen you on the recruiting trail, watching kids in gyms, and could you kinda let us in on some of the things that you look for in a kid
Mhm.
when you first walk into the building?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, from a stylistic standpoint, versatility, I think, reigns supreme. This game continues to change and evolve, and you don't wanna be on the back end of that. You wanna be on the ahead of that curve, and the
Mhm,
only way you can be ahead of that curve is have players that are really versatile.
mhm,
And so I really love the versatility, first and foremost. And of course, there's a level of talent that is a non-negotiable, right? However, there's also um, there you go into the next equation of people that you want to coach, right? There's a
mhm,
competitiveness and a attention to detail and a joy that I really connect with. You want players that fit that, right? Um, and so I think I've done a really good job of finding the kind of kids I want to coach, right?
mhm,
There is a competitive character to people. There is a joy to the experience. There is a courage that they bring, in terms of how they walk into their journey. And
mhm,
there's a grit. I think those are you can tell that when you sit and watch. And I don't just sit. I think sometimes head coaches will sit with their big emblem and think that what they're doing is quote babysitting. For
mhm,
me, like there is a difference between, person A and person B, and sometimes that difference is you just have to watch. You just have to
mhm,
really sit and watch how they interact, how they take coaching, how they run on and off the floor. Some of those intangibles are actually kind of who they are in terms of their character.
mhm,
And so I think those are, I probably don't recruit more of the top 10 players than I do recruit, but the ones that I
mhm,
get are the ones that I should get and that I worked really
right,
hard to fit into.
and a lot of kids are really kind of focused on scoring
Mhm.
when they get into a gym,
That's a good
and
point.
and and sometimes scoring is not it's not happening that day, and then they kinda collapse. Like, what is your recommendation for a lot of the kids who value scoring over
Mhm,
the intangibles you just spoke about,
mhm.
and how they receive coaching and all that stuff because
Yeah,
we're constantly preaching it, but
yeah,
they don't some of them, they believe it, some of them don't.
yep,
I was talking to a girl and the other day, and she said, I think I played well, but I missed my layups."
yep,
And I'm like, "Don't worry about that." They're not really watching those things, they're watching
yeah.
all the intangibles.
Mhm. Yeah, here's what I said it to my own team. What a great question. So we had one of our players drafted, one of our two seniors drafted this what a week or two ago, and we were all there. And the next day at our session, I said at our training session, in our circle up, I said, "What did people notice last night about the draft?" And of course, noticing that one of our kids got drafted, one of our kids is going to training camp. Just a really good year for our seniors. And I said, "You know what I noticed?" Is that when you look at that draft, all 3 rounds, I think obviously scoring was not the statistical category that mattered. It just wasn't,
Mhm.
right? Look at Tanaya Latson, right? She led the nation in scoring for 2 of her 4 years in college, and she was in the second round, right?
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
it's recognizing that again, our game is so um, is so evolving that there's lots of different
And
ways to do
dynamic,
it.
and dynamic.
Exactly.
Mhm,
Yes. And so there's so many different ways to do it. So I think people that are, I always say this, there's so many statistical categories on a box score. Sometimes, oftentimes, people that are in their own way are because they're focusing on one or two of them too much. And all that
mhm,
matters at the end of the game is that we as a team win more statistical categories than they do. You don't have to win them all,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And same thing as a player. As you're being evaluated, there's a lot of statistical categories. You don't have to win them all. You just
mhm.
have to win enough of them. And if you focus so much on scoring, then your assists are down, or your decision making is down, or your right. Those two statistical categories are also important, right?
Right,
So I think you're exactly right. I think getting young people to understand that they're obsessing on one statistical category is actually hindering the versatility of all the other categories to their detriment.
right. Right. And I'm glad that you're reiterating that because it's a constant battle with young people.
Big
And
time.
obviously I'm a trainer and I teach scoring and finishing and all these different moves and but at the end I'm always letting them know these things might not work in the game.
Mhm.
It's the stuff that I'm not really going to show you how to dive for a loose ball and leave some skin on the ground and clap on the bench and cheer for your teammates and all those other things that transfer to the next level
Mhm.
because scoring doesn't always transfer because so it just getting back to the recruiting, do you kind of go to gyms and to see exactly what you need for that particular season, that particular
Mm.
year, or are you kind of recruiting for a year or 2 out?
Mhm. It depends on the kid. I think I never wanna recruit or coach a kid that I can see their ceiling, right? And
Mm,
you've been doing this a long time. There are plenty of kids that you can watch, and they're about as good as they're gonna get. Either
mhm,
because their decision making or their work ethic or their competitive character or right, that you can see their ceiling, right? Well, that's never going to be a culture fit because part of our culture is the more invested these kids are so invested because they see themselves getting better, right? So
mhm,
if I can recruit a kid that I think can make an immediate difference, the key is honesty. I
mhm,
tell them that you're going to need to come in, and I go through your strengths, I go through your work steps, but like our expectation is you're going to be able to help us right away. And with that comes the work. Whereas other kids, you say,
mhm,
I can't wait because you're going to continue on this journey and you could surpass the kid that plays right away. Right. But we've got to we got to continue to hone in a few of these areas before, like, I
mhm,
think the key is honesty. If you don't operate in an honest space in that way, it's
mhm,
never gonna work, right? So I
mm,
would say you're kind of I'm more afraid of the kid that can play right away if I can see their ceiling,
right,
than I am the kid that can't play that maybe can't play 20 minutes a game right away, but it's gonna be really good down the line. And we kinda just point to our draft picks and say, we had a kid who, the kid who was drafted this year, for example, she didn't start for us till she was a junior, and now
mhm,
she's making good money playing as a pro. I mean, it's everyone's journey looks different. It really does.
mhm, mhm. And you've had a tremendous impact on so many young women over your coaching career. One of the things that stuck out to me watching, the Instagram posts is how you celebrate the players that you have and how you celebrate the players that leave and when they come back to visit. Like that for
Mm,
me is huge
mhm,
because it says a lot about you as a person. I also saw something, in the articles about um, the speech that you gave at a Fortune magazine keynote speech, and
Mhm.
one of the things that you quoted that the best advice that you received was, "It's all about life is about 2 things, who you are and who you help." Can
Mhm.
you talk a little bit about that?
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah. So first off, coming back, one of my great stories is we had senior night this year as our day of our Duke game, and one of our seniors from last year was playing professionally in Hungary, and she actually surprised the team and flew back from Hungary just for the weekend for the games,
Oh,
right? I
mm,
mean, that's the kind of culture we want, right? It means that their time with us was meaningful enough that they always wanted to return it. And then we have another one of the seniors in that class who's taking this summer off from playing because she's playing on the top Euro Cup team,
mhm,
EuroLeague team, and she's living in Chapel Hill because she likes our trainers and our strength coach, right? But anyway, yeah, that was really fascinating. In 2015, I had gotten a call that I had been selected as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders.
mhm.
And I, of course, thought that was a joke, right? So I thought it was my college friend, telling a joke on me. So, we had this back and forth. And I said, well, who else is on this list? And they said, well, you know, Bill and Melinda Gates and Tim Cook and LeBron James and the Pope and Taylor Swift. And I was like, oh, that sounds about right. Perfect. And so I said, well, if you're so sure, why don't you, you know, she, we had a funny exchange because I thought it was a joke. And the lady said, we'd love for you to speak at the dinner. And I said, "Oh, yeah, no problem, I'd be great. Why don't you, send an email to my phone while you're here?" Well, sure enough, that email came in, and I was like, "Oh my god, that wasn't a joke," right? And so I really had to think about what do I say to a group of these people that have done so much and had so much
Mhm,
impact, and I thought the reason I had been on the list has nothing to do with the sport of basketball, right? It has to
mhm,
do with the fact that I had brought in people further than maybe they would have gone alone, right? And
mhm,
how we were able to do that. So I really looked at why I was on the list. And it was obviously because of success we had at Princeton. And I said the only reason we had that success was because they went further together than they go alone. However,
mm,
every piece um, had to bring their best, right? And so I kind of spoke about how life is honestly about those two things: who you are in your
mhm,
authentic self, how you show up is always it always matters, good, bad, or indifferent. It's never
mhm,
neutral, right? And then who you help, just like on the basketball court, right? Like who
mhm,
you help, literally, but in life, like who you help is your legacy, right?
mhm,
And so I hope that that gives people, my players, validation that who they are and who they helped was always enough.
mhm,
And similarly, it gives me the confidence to have, you know, less fear of failure, knowing that who I am and who I help is
mhm,
actually my legacy while I'm doing it.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and so it felt like the right thing to say because I was so amazed and honored to be even on the list, and it felt like
mhm,
that's the only reason I had found success in my life is I've been authentic to who I am, and I've
mhm.
been really driven to help others.
And who would you say has helped Courtney Banghart the most? Or is it a group or accumulation of people in your life? Like,
Mhm.
who would you point out? Who would you pinpoint?
I think I have unfortunately, it's not one person. I've been surrounded by cheerleaders and challengers my whole life, right? The
Mhm,
challengers that I've been surrounded by are in competitive athletics. Your challengers are always, they're always around you because they're trying to beat you, right? And so I have to continually improve because the challengers are out there, right? And
mhm,
so other coaches and my former coaches and people like you, people I've seen have excellence and bring people along. Um, challenge me to continue, right? To get
mhm,
better. And then
mhm,
the cheerleaders, we all have, my case, my big sister, but these people that are just, they're with you, right?
mhm,
They're just always with you, win or lose, to sustain the ebbs and flows of a competitive industry, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
so I think for me, my biggest influencers are honestly the combination of the challengers and the cheerleaders in my life. And I
mhm.
honor both of them all the time.
Courtney Banghart, thank you so much for coming through. Like, it's been a pleasure.
Merrick Palmer, you are him, as they say. But honestly, watching you do what you do, I'm not surprised that you're running a podcast now. I've seen you in the gym. I've seen you really develop a lot of Canada basketball's youth and do it in an egoless way. And look at how much they're thriving in our country, playing and in their own country. So I'm honored to be on with you as well.
Thank you so much. And I know you had a, you fit me into your schedules. I'm thankful, and I just want to wish you all the best this coming season, and much continued success. Like you are her.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, so take
I'll see
care,
you.
and
You
we'll see
too.
you soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Awesome.